Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stephen Kingcast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Each week, I will review one entry in the bibliography of Stephen King in the chronological order of publication. And what you're getting out of this episode, this is a bonus podcast, a supplementary piece that is a companion to my larger review of The Dark Half, which was released on the same day. What I'm going to do in this episode is I'm touching very faintly on the Dark Tower. Typically with bonus episodes, I examine the connections to the Dark Tower. Now, there aren't really any connections to the world of the Dark Tower with the Dark Half. I mean, there aren't any truly explicit or strong connections, but I'm going to talk about something here that is going to spoil the end of the Dark Tower. So if you have not finished the Dark Tower series, I would stop listening now, go finish the Dark Tower series, and then come back. So just be warned that this review has heavy spoilers for the events of the Dark Tower. But what I'm really talking about here, it's not really it's not about connections. It's really all about Alan Pangborn. And so you might be wondering, why are you talking about Alan Pangborn in a Dark Tower bonus episode? And what it comes down to is this. Let me put Alan into a little bit of context here. Alan Pangborn is the Stephen King archetypal hero realized to his full extent. All right? I mean, he is the everyman who both comes to the rescue and relies on the support of the community around him. And he is, and I'm not joking, a small town superhero, elected to do good against small life wrongs, but winds up on two occasions having to combat true evil as it takes on two completely disparate forms. Pangborn, in that sense, is the linchpin of the recurring nature of evil as it pertains to Castle Rock. He's the mirror image of his predecessor, George Bannerman, who also confronted evil in his town on two occasions. On both occasions, blind to it, first with Frank Dodd and later with Cujo, whose rage decimates the small town sheriff. Pangborn is the answer to the growing threat of the Stephen King universe. As the evil evolves and grows stronger, so do the heroes that are called to combat it. George Bannerman was already in existence when the evils of King's books began to manifest. From a metatextual standpoint, with the evils being so fresh, Bannerman was ill-prepared for its threat and was consumed by it. Conversely, Pangborn is elected after our understanding of the evils within King's previous works and is ready to face the danger. Not only does he symbolize the cycle of evil, but his appearance also reinforces the duality and doubling present within the Dark Half. One, he's a character who stands against evil twice. Secondly, he's the second sheriff to do so. However, he's the one to break the hold that evil has maintained, which is why Needful Things is considered the last Castle Rock story. Though we see it again, it's the last time evil comes to that town or is born from that town because Alan Pangborn drove it away. Pangborn is unlike the Ben Mearses, the Johnny Smiths, or other well-intentioned, good-hearted small-town main characters because, aside from Jack Sawyer and Father Callahan, he's the only one to come back to star in a book more than once. The difference is key because while in my other reviews I may have referred to other characters as heroes, I was inadvertently doing Alan Pangborn a disservice because Alan is a hero. He's a modern-day knight, or the superhero like I mentioned earlier, who will fight the supervillainy that comes to town, whether it's the resurrected ghost of a person who never existed or the devil himself. Just look at how King writes him. In the Dark Half, on page 239, when he's coming home, King writes, "He started upstairs, shoes held in one hand, moving with a smoothness that made him seem almost to float. His body possessed a deep grace, the exact opposite of Thad Beaumont's clumsiness, which Alan rarely showed. His flesh seemed to know some arcane secret of motion which his mind found somehow embarrassing. Now, in this silence, there was no need to hide it, and he moved with a shadowy ease that was almost macabre. I mean, and not only does he have this like superhuman grace, which makes him like this small town ninja, we learn in Needful Things that his shadow puppet ability isn't just a party trick; it's a demonstration of deep magic that he possesses. Alan Pangborn is a very, very powerful agent of the White. Alan had the potential to be Stephen King's Jack Ryan, his repairman Jack, Charlie Parker, Happen Leonard, or Agent Pendergast. While we had seven novels following Roland the Last Gunslinger, the novels read like one continuous story. Alan Pangborn's stories, however, the two ones that exist, read like episodic adventures. And while it's a relief that the character, who suffers immensely between the pages of the books, I'm glad that he's given a happy ending. It's a missed opportunity to experience the adventures of a small-town cop battling the forces of the Netherworld time and time again. That would have been awesome. I would love that for Stephen King to publish books, and on the cover for it to say, an Alan Pangborn novel. It would have been incredible. And I had just mentioned the White, and so it does tie in a little bit to the Dark Tower here, in the sense that the White is that all-encompassing force of good that combats the Crimson King and all of the darkness out there, and our characters in the Stephen King universe, the good ones, the forces of good, they're emboldened and empowered by the White, and it's clear that is what Alan is. He's a conduit for this power. And so the reason why this is a bonus episode is because of this right here. Because when I first read, I think I read Needful Things first, and then the Dark Half, but I think that's the order that I did it. Regardless, I really took a liking to this character and his abilities and his awesomeness, because he loomed so large in my mind, because he had defeated Leland Gaunt, who happened to be one of the most powerful incarnations of evil depicted in a Stephen King novel, because he had the distinction of playing a significant role in 2 Stephen King novels, which was a rarity in the chronology of Stephen King. I always kept hoping, right up until the very, very end of the Dark Tower series, that Roland, while following the beam, would cross over into Castle Rock, whereupon he'd realize that his quartet wasn't complete until Alan Pangborn joined, or at least helped him in a significant adventure. Because Castle Rock had been such a defining aspect of King's works, because Pangborn became its figurehead, and because the Dark Tower was the culmination of a decades-long journey, I strongly expected a convergence. And I've spoken before about how that Avengers-style mashup never happened, that there was a disappointment that I felt. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to continue, rereading for the podcast, is because I'm now reading with a very specific purpose, with a critical lens, and so if I'm objective about things, I might be able to see the last 3 remaining books of the Dark Tower a lot differently. But I had expected Alan Pangborn to show back up, and shame on me, because there was nothing that hinted at that. It was just my hopes, and it was my wishful thinking. But honestly, there are, I believe off the top of my head, not that I believe off the top of my head, I know there are scenes in the final 3 books that take place in small town Maine, in our world, and I just couldn't help but think that it really wouldn't, at the time I thought this, that it wouldn't really have changed much of the trajectory of the novel if it had just taken place in Castle Rock, and the shootouts that occur. Like, how awesome it would have been if Roland and his quartet were just saved all of a sudden by Alan Pangborn rolling up. it could have been great, I mean, and for Alan to talk to Roland and discuss what had happened in Needful Things, and for him to talk about Leland Gaunt, and how cool it would have been if like Roland, responded or thought about how that reminded him of a merchant in Gilead, or tales of a merchant that would travel through the baronies, and give you an item for your soul. It just would have given that gravitas, and that deep connection, to the Dark Tower universe. And I mean, it was hinted that Leland Gaunt was from the world of Roland, and was a wizard or a demon, and that he's very similar in some regard to Randall Flagg, and I mean, so it wouldn't have been out of the question. And because it was in the realm of possibilities, my mind had just kind of constructed it to become a probability. And so, like I said, it's shame on me for thinking that that's the way it was going to shake out. But still, Alan Pangborn he's awesome. He's an awesome character. And like I said, he's the archetypal Stephen King small town hero realized to his fullest potential. I mean, we've seen all these other characters that have just kind of been these good people in small towns, but he's the first one that he becomes the superhero of the small town. And that's awesome. So, should this have been a bonus episode? I don't know. I probably could have just tacked it on to the Dark Half review, but I just didn't want to give away really too much of the ending of the Dark Tower. So, it's very short, guys. That's all I've got. But if you have any time on your hands, feel free to write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. And you can, whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on, whether it be Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube, just please leave a review, because it will greatly help out. And you can follow me on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Blue Sky. And may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I'll see you here next time, where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.